afternoon or good evening to our global audience and to all our distinguished colleagues and friends. I am truly honored to serve as the moderator of this session. As has been mentioned, my name is Michal Mlinar, and I am the Deputy Executive Director of the United Nations Human Settlements Program, UN Habitat, based in Nairobi. I'm a Slovak diplomat, and previously I served as Slovakia's ambassador to the United Nations in New York for almost 6 years. I'm joined today by a distinguished group of panelists and discussants, and let me mention first their names. First, His Excellency Dr. Danilo Turk, President of Club de Madrid and former President of Slovenia, but also former senior UN diplomat and former senior ambassador from Slovenia. Secondly, Mr. Hassan Damluji, founder of Global Nation. Thirdly, Dr. Kaitesi Usta, CEO of Rwanda Governance Board. Next will be Ms. Emma Casworth-Ockman, Vice President for Marketing at Everland. And our next panelist will be Ms. Johanna Kao, Senior Director of Asia Pacific of the International Republican Institute. And a group of distinguished discussants will be Ms. Sahra Karimi, a filmmaker, university lecturer, and former Director General of Afghan Film Organization from Afghanistan. Vasuki Shastri, Associate Fellow in the Asia Pacific Program of Chatham House, United Kingdom. Dr. Maxim Yakovlev, Head of Department of International Relations and Director of School for Policy Analysis at National University of Kiev, Mohila Academy from Ukraine. And last but not least, Gaba Lakel-Maridia, Communications and Advocacy Officer at Africa Freedom of Information Center from Uganda. I hope you can see us and hear us loud and clear, and we will be moving into our discussion and our topic shortly. I just would like to highlight first that this session aims at examining how governing structures can better implement justice at their core. We will also explore how we can address injustice, insecurity, and inequalities in the midst of global crises. Furthermore, it will review how the global North, South, East, and West perceive and respond to these challenges, and also how to achieve global solidarity to tackle these challenges in concert. From UN Habitat's perspective, I just would like to add to our conversation, highlighting that about 55% of the world's population today lives in cities, and it is expected to rise to 70% by 2050, making urbanization truly one of the most significant trends of the 21st century, and opening a window of opportunity to transform cities into drivers of sustainable development and social justice. In addition, more than 50% of the world's population are women, but only 5% of the world's cities are shockingly led by women. So there are a lot of challenges also on the cities and on urbanization side, but of course, our conversation will be a lot wider than that, and it will be stemming from the Sustainable Development Goals and focusing on social justice also in that context, because we believe that inclusive governance and political empowerment is where all members of the community engage equally in decision-making, and it is central to achieving all SDGs. Of course, we have to be aware of the overarching principle of the 2030 agenda of leaving no one behind. Let's move on. First of all, I am turning to Dr. Kaitesi Usta, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Rwanda Governance Board and also a commissioner in the Rwanda Law Reform Commission, and has vast experience in many related issues that we will be discussing today. Dr. Kaitesi, distribution of power is intended to ensure enforcement of the rule of law and a policy that can deliver for the people's well-being. However, many people are still treated unjustly worldwide and experience weak law enforcement, as recorded by the Pathfinders for Peaceful, Just, and Inclusive Societies by UN member states. What is your take on this? What can we do to ensure a good governance where justice is present?
Thank you very much, moderator, for the opportunity. Indeed, social justice is going to be the driving element for inclusion, and good governance stands at the core of that. The Rwanda Governance Board is an institution in Rwanda that is in charge of monitoring governance and service delivery. And I wanted to say that Rwanda presents an example. Almost 30 years ago, we suffered a genocide against Tutsi. And that genocide was a result of exclusion, was a result of eliminating people from participation in the well-being of their lives and in the running of the country. So my take is governance should mean, and that's what it means for Rwanda, a system in which everything done puts the citizens at the center. So what we do it for the interests of the people that we serve, whether in civil society, the private sector, or the political sector. The second element brings in accountability. Resources major in many places in terms of allowing people to live a decent life. And social justice is really about giving people a decent life. So where there is corruption, where there is exclusion, where inclusion lacks, for Rwanda's story, we realize that you must have systems, you must have laws, you must have structures that permit inclusion. That means that you create governing systems that will allow the people to be part and parcel of the development agenda that the country has. But whether you do that and do not create strong systems to fight corruption, you do it with a lot of void, because corruption undermines what everyone does. Corruption promotes discrimination. Corruption promotes poverty. So my take is that government and all the other actors need to be intentionally inclusive and citizen-centric in everything that they do. For Rwanda, that took a change of many things, a change of law, a creation of new institutions like the Rwanda Governance Board that I'm representing, but also creating systems that permit the participation of citizens. So other than the fact that different citizens are working and are part of the structures of decision-making, let me give just one example that we do as a governance institution. We run every year a citizen report card. And the purpose of this citizen report card is to give a voice to the people to evaluate the leadership, but also to assess whether they are participating. And through that, the citizens are able to tell us how much they appreciate citizen participation as a core element, but also how much they appreciate the development of the country, how much they appreciate the agriculture sector, how much we do it over 16 sectors of service delivery. And today I can tell you that the citizens highly appreciate the security sector and feel safe and secure. But on the other hand, they are not as fairly appreciative of the agriculture sector in terms of inputs and resources. So let me say that the core elements of the definition of good governance for us that deliver on social justice have four main elements. The first is, of course, accountability. The second is transparency. And the third is efficiency in using scarce resources. And that efficiency happens when there are systems of transparency, there are institutions of accountability. And then fourth is that all of that has to be done within the perspective of citizen-centric. So we must do those things. And that requires a strong political will, I should say. The politicians that drive the legal reforms and the processes should be able and intentionally pursue togetherness. So in Rwanda, we have had three main choices. The pursuit of togetherness, that means that every time everything that is done by both government, civil society, and everyone promotes our togetherness, our unity. Why? Because we suffered a genocide against Tutsi. Discrimination undermines common and collective goals. So for Rwanda, it has been a strategic decision that we pursue our togetherness. And through that has been through unity. Of course, the second has been accountability, as I said, creating institutions of accountability, ensuring that the rule of law happens and happens for everyone without discrimination, because we have a history of discrimination. Today, Rwanda has 61% of women parliamentarians, but less than 30 years ago, we did not even have 10%. We have a history in 40 years where we had a parliament that was predominant, only men without a woman. That has taken the political will to change the laws. It has also taken the intention to be inclusive by designing the 30% shareholder of women, but also by ensuring that that happens. And through that, we have a gender monitoring office. So
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ustav. This is very valuable experience on the citizen context, particularly from Rwanda. Moving next to our colleague and friend, His Excellency, Mr. Danilo Turk, President of the Club de Madrid and former President of Slovenia, who has a very distinguished and rich career in politics, diplomacy, and also in the academia. Your Excellency, the United Nations Convention Against Corruption has been signed by 189 parties, including 181 countries. However, we still witness the harmful impact of corruption, with 5% of global GDP lost to corruption annually. This amount could have lifted 1.4 billion people from poverty, to say the least. In this light, what kind of framework do you believe we need to systematically combat corruption? And specifically, how such a framework can translate into delivering justice for the lives of the people?
Thank you very much, Ambassador Mlinar. It's great to see you again. The last time we met was in New York a couple of years ago. Now, of course, we are connected online and we are discussing a very important subject. I'm very pleased to be part of this global town hall meeting, and I would like to say a few words, or perhaps a little more general, before answering directly to the question you put. I would like to say that, speaking as president of Club de Madrid, I'm very pleased that our organization is involved in this global discussion. As you probably know, Club de Madrid is an organization of former democratically elected presidents and prime ministers. We are currently 125 members from 73 countries from various parts of the world, from all regions of the world. And we have developed a number of programs which we hope would help moving the agenda of international community towards greater social justice and stronger peace. Now, I would like to say that anti-corruption is a very important part of this project. But it has to be seen in a context. It has to be seen in a context because it cannot be isolated from the overall development. A short while ago, we heard the Director General of National Labor Organization, Mr. Gilbert Humboldt, speaking about the need of putting human beings, human first, in the center of development, and social justice being a critical factor in that regard. And he also pleaded for a global coalition for social justice. We, Club de Madrid, are very pleased to see ourselves in that context as part of that emerging global coalition. And our Club de Madrid has proposed the United Nations to convene a World Social Summit. And the Secretary General of the UN, Antonio Guterres, who is also our member as former Prime Minister of Portugal, he accepted that. And now this is being discussed among member states. And there are very good reasons to believe that we shall have such a summit in 2025. We shall build, obviously, on the outcomes of this year's discussion on sustainable development goals. We see social development very much central to the Sustainable Development Goal, which is the broadest international project for a better world. And we should not lose hope or lose energy for working for that purpose. Now, as far as the preparations of the World Social Summit are concerned, we believe that we should take inspiration, among other things, from the success of the first World Social Summit that took place in Copenhagen in 1995. And that outcome was very instrumental in developing subsequent Millennium Development Goals in 2000 and Sustainable Development Goals in 2015. So we see all these issues in close connection, and we would like to invite all the participants of today's discussion, town hall meeting, to think about what we can contribute between now and 2025 to make the World Social Summit a success. One of the elements in that picture is fighting corruption. And here the world has a real problem, because there is, as you said, a convention adopted back in 2003, which the International Anti-Corruption Convention, which has a large number of state parties, but very little implementation. The implementation mechanism of that convention is very weak. And there is an initiative which has been established several years ago by a number of activists, including the Transparency International and other international actors, to put together an international anti-corruption court. Now, see, the idea of building an additional institution is necessary if we want to improve implementation of that convention. We cannot be satisfied with mechanisms which can do more for anti-corruption at present. For example, the Human Rights Committee, based on the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, could do more. Clearly, they could do more to focus on corruption problems in the context of their human rights implementation mandate. But for various reasons, this is not happening. And therefore, there is a need for further development of international procedural mechanisms which would focus more intensely on the problem of corruption. Now, obviously, the initiative which was launched has been gaining support. There are 33 members of Club de Madrid who have signed that support. Of course, there is a number of governments which have been favor and continue to work for that initiative, including Canada, Ecuador, Netherlands, and many others. And we hope that this initiative will progress. We know that corruption is a very serious and diverse phenomenon, serious problem and a diverse phenomenon. Therefore, our initiative...
Sorry, I have to interrupt you, President Turk. We'll come back to you, of course, for a follow-up.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, we'll move on with the next question, because obviously we are very pressed with time, but thanks very much for also highlighting the World Social Summit and, of course, linking it to this important work. I would like to now move to Mr. Hassan Ramlouji, who is a British Iraqi development expert, who is also co-founder of Global Nation, a think tank which focuses on international cooperation and advocating for a more fair and effective international system. According to this 2022 SDG report, 1 in 6 people have experienced discrimination in some form, most in relation to their identity, race, and culture. In this light, we have witnessed the emergence of a global solidarity spirit, exemplified by movements like Black Lives Matter, resonating worldwide to push injustice and discrimination elimination. Also, we know that your organization, Global Nation, will shortly be launching a global solidarity report. In this context, what should we do better? Would you talk to us through some of your global solidarity report findings and recommendations and how they relate to better governance and more social justice? Hassan, can you hear us?
I'm sorry. Thank you so much for the invitation to be here and to speak and to join you in such a distinguished panel. As you said right at the beginning of this session, the world faces complex challenges, and those challenges are very different one from another. The challenge of the technology that we need to defeat climate change is very different from developing vaccines against pandemics. But there are similarities between the many complex challenges that we face as a world that cross borders. And the framing of this session around social justice as what we need in order to confront those complex challenges is a very good one. So if social justice is in a way the cross-cutting aim of what the world needs to deliver in order to face down its different complex challenges, then how do you achieve social justice? Fundamentally, what you need is solidarity. Solidarity is the tool that delivers solutions that serve many, many people. And that is why the solidarity is actually the theme, or to be specific, reigniting solidarity is the theme of this year's UNGA or UN High Level Week that'll happen in New York in just a couple of weeks' time. Why solidarity? Solidarity is essentially the tool that humans have developed to overcome what are called collective action problems. The complex challenges that the world face are different, but what they have in common is that they are collective action problems. And what that means is that one country's selfish interest to burn more oil and take the profits from that, or to hoard vaccines and not share them, is at odds with solving the problem for everybody. So how do we overcome these? Solidarity is the tool that we have evolved as humans to use in order to solve these problems, which can be problems in the family or in the community or in the country, but also at the global level. And one of the interesting things about solidarity as such a underlying solution to the problems we face, the theme of this year's UNGA, is that it's never been measured before. We don't have a yardstick that says, here is how solidarity is doing at a global level. And that is what our think tank is going to publish for the very first time in a couple of weeks' time. Now, I have to be careful about sharing the findings of a report that's not yet published, but I'm happy to talk a little bit about it. The report is a collaboration between ourselves and a wide range of academics from MIT, London School of Economics, New York University, and others. Also, Global Citizen and an organization called Localities that we used to do new polling data of the global public to set alongside existing trusted sources in terms of other indicators such as institutional and impact indicators. And that we bring together in an analysis of global solidarity that has three elements. Number one, what we call identities. Do the global public support international cooperation? Do they feel part of a global community? Number two, institutions. Does that feeling of support for amongst the public translate into institutions that have the funding, the mandate, the activities that can lead up to action? And then three, impacts. Is this laddering up to something? So without giving away too much data now, let me just tell you a little bit what we found. The global public is far more cosmopolitan, is far more solidaristic than people expect. And we have the data that will show that. That's the good news. The global public on the whole wants us to do far better as a world, including not in a fluffy way, but actually really have institutions with teeth that can solve problems like climate change. And institutions, despite what you hear, have not collapsed, but they also have not surged to meet the moment. And especially the world countries are agreeing with each other less and less. So although funding has gone up a bit and gender balance has gone up a bit, the ability for countries to agree with each other has gone down. And what that leaves us on the impact side is a big failure. Carbon emissions continue to rise. Conflict doubled in 2022. Conflict deaths doubled in 2022 compared to the year before. And overall, not only is that bad in and of itself, but it risks a vicious cycle where people seeing that this thing is not working, it's not delivering impacts, leads to reduced support amongst the public and then weaker institutions. So although there's good news about a public that supports solidarity, there is a risk of a tailspin in solidarity. And that is why the world needs to implement the calls to action that we have in our report around climate, around pandemics, and also around how we finance global goals. And all of the details will be available very soon. And I'd really encourage those who are interested in this area to look out for the Global Solidarity Report as it lands. And we'd love your feedback.
Thank you, Hassan. Thank you. Great. It's really important that we look into the mirror about all these important challenges. I would like now to get joined by Ms. Joanna Cowell, Senior Director of Asia Pacific of International Republican Institute. She has had multiple encounters with issues regarding international political development, nonprofit management, and citizen empowerment. Joanna, in developing countries, there is a prevailing perception that priorities such as democracy and freedom of expression may not be as significant as ensuring that people have access to basic necessities like food and housing. What is your take on that? What can people do to empower themselves when the government presence is lacking?
Well, thank you for that. It's nice to be able to participate in the Global Town Hall again, especially on this topic with this incredible panel. So thanks to FPCI for inviting me back. So, to your question on perceptions, I actually wanted to counter that assertion a little bit with a couple of different sets of perceptions. So earlier this year, this organization, the Alliance for Democracies, published their Democracy Perception Index, which covers 50,000 people in 53 different countries. And there's two key findings from that study I wanted to flag. The first is that a very high number, sort of 84% of respondents believe in the importance of democracy. And second, which is very relevant to this question, more than 90% of the respondents said that freedom of speech, fair elections, and equal rights are important to have in their country. And this was a finding that cut across people living in democratic countries and non-democratic countries. And so that tells me that people around the world place a very high value on personal freedoms. And I'd say that's absolutely consistent with what we see at IRI in our work. We're an NGO that focuses on strengthening democratic institutions and practices around the world. More than for the better part of the last 20 years, I have been focused on that in Asia. And I'm never surprised that people feel very strongly about their right to have a say about the decisions that impact their lives and their communities. Now, interestingly, this same study, the Democracy Perception Index, people identified the biggest threats to democracy as income inequality and corruption, right, which we've been talking about here today already. Other studies have shown strong predictors of people being dissatisfied with how democracy is working, the state of the economy, and how people feel about economic opportunity. And that's also consistent with what I've seen, in my work across Asia. So what I'm getting to here is that there is a lot of data that shows that people's perceptions on the importance of democracy and personal freedoms is actually pretty high around the world. And so to come back to your question, what that tells me is the idea of needing to sort of prioritize certain kinds of rights. It's a bit of a false choice, right? Whether, it's in the development world or in academic circles or in this discussion we've been having today, there's this fairly broad consensus. We need all of these things. And it's the interconnectedness of these topics that's particularly true in the context of this discussion on social justice. Because, as we've heard, the overall prosperity of a community, the ability of people to have the stability and the peace that fosters good health, good education, and economic growth, those things are intrinsically linked to the desire of individuals to exercise free choice, to have some say over the policies that affect them, and to be able to hold their government accountable for their actions. So the question then to me isn't sort of which set of rights are more important to development, but how to make development more inclusive and meaningful. So it's a question of what kind of systems are going to best promote inclusive development. And I'm going to echo Dr. Khatisi here because, inclusive development needs government systems that can deal with complex challenges and pressures, that can be flexible and adaptable and innovative, even when under a lot of stress. And systems that are able to find ways to respond to the priorities of the people within that system. And so, unsurprisingly, the system I think that best provides that is a democratic system. And so just to close out, to play this out a little bit very briefly, to illustrate what I think is the very circular and interdependent nature of all of this, if we start with the premise of the question, right, of the priority of the need for food and housing, maybe add health and education, for example. Right, these things depend on economic development and a level of stability in various institutions. Well, that stems from rule of law. Right? Rule of law depends on having some kind of systems of accountability within the governance structure. Accountability requires people to be empowered and to have agency, to have access to information and express their opinions and make choices. Those political engagement processes are strengthened when they are more inclusive of different parts of society. And so, sort of closing that circle, it means that more people are engaged and more involved in shaping the decisions about the things that affect them every day, like access to food and housing and healthcare. Now, I realize I've very much simplified what's a very complex set of interdependent issues, but hopefully that is a good starting point for discussions, and I will stop there.
Thanks very much, Joanna, for those interlinkages and synergies that we need to focus on. Indeed, in trying to achieve a comprehensive approach. Our last panelist, Cusworth, Vice President for Marketing at Everland, specializing in sustainability and policy making. And she has also served as a senior advisor in Green Finance Institute and been involved in our topic in different ways from those perspectives. Emma, local communities, including indigenous populations, are often excluded from development discussions, but their inclusion is crucial for achieving justice. Your organization, Everland, supports forest and indigenous communities that are often overlooked, especially in the face of significant climate challenges. Can you tell us a bit about the standards that Everland is promoting in order to ensure that benefits flow to the most vulnerable community and that action on deforestation offer communities a pathway out of poverty? And how does this link to social justice in your view?
Thank you, Michael. I'm delighted to be here, and it's a really critical question that you have asked. Climate change is one of the greatest inequalities of our time, largely caused obviously by the global north, but the consequences hit hardest in vulnerable communities in the global south, particularly low-income communities and indigenous peoples, as you say. And those impacts are devastating. They're driving up poverty, creating food and water insecurity, and increasing competition for land and resources. Deforestation is the fourth largest source of greenhouse gas emissions today, and halting deforestation is a massive challenge. Tropical forest loss in 2022, for example, was up 10%, and we lost an area of land, a forest roughly the size of Switzerland. But halting deforestation is also a massive opportunity, not just to fight climate change, but also to create sustainable development for those vulnerable communities. Nature can provide about a quarter of the emission reductions that we need over the next couple of decades. But at the moment, only about 3% of climate finance is going to forests, and only about 1% of that is going to Indigenous people and local communities. And it's evident to us that all of these political pledges that have been made over the years are failing to deliver action. And governments cannot solve this problem on their own. We need a combination of policy and markets to come together. And forest loss, ultimately, it's an economic problem. If a tree is worth more dead than it is alive to the people who live around that tree, it's going to get cut down. The only way to end deforestation is to fundamentally change the economics of a living tree, one community at a time. And around 17% of the world population depends on forests for income and/or subsistence living. By using carbon credits, we can turn a living tree into a source of revenue so that money literally grows on trees. And that's where project-based RED comes in. And RED, for anyone who's not familiar with it, it stands for Reducing Emissions from Deforestation and Forest Degradation. And good RED projects are a highly effective tool to halt deforestation and deliver system-level sustainable development at a local level. And they do that by working with communities so they have the agency and voice in how that revenue is spent. And that's really, really critical because the decisions about whether to cut down a tree or not are not made in the halls of government. They're made by people living in the forest. What RED projects do is essentially channel money from carbon credits, which are largely bought in the global north, into forest-based communities in the global south. And that money is then used to directly address the drivers of deforestation, whether that's creating alternative incomes, helping secure land tenure rights, or providing basic needs, sanitation, education, health, water security. And all of that is localized to the very specific needs of the community living within the project zone. So good RED projects are founded on governance frameworks that give communities agency in how that revenue is spent. Let me give you a couple of examples. So if we look at Wildlife Works' Kasagao Corridor RED project in Kenya, they work with community-based carbon committees to directly allocate revenue. And that's resulted in $1.2 million in bursaries to 26,000 students, health education programs in schools, and a vast amount of employment. We're seeing there, for example, poachers turning to rangers, so their income is now generated by protecting wildlife instead of killing it. Or in Maindombe in the Democratic Republic of Congo, again, the project there is supporting medical facilities for 5,500 people and economic opportunities for more than 2,000 people. And if we travel over to Cambodia, we've got the Keo Semar project, which is working with Bunong people to secure and manage Indigenous communal land titles. And of course, in Southern Cardamom, Wildlife Alliance has helped secure community land tenure across 28 villages, which benefits around 6,000 families. So when it's done well, where local communities and Indigenous peoples living in threatened forests have agency and voice, then the solutions for climate change can also drive justice, that social justice, and a pathway out of poverty. And RED projects are a key tool in that armory. I will stop there. Thank you.
Great. Thanks very much, Emma. This is such an important practical perspective of the discussion that we are having. Wow, what a wealth of experience and wonderful ideas. Thank you to all of you, dear colleagues, for really offering us such a great perspective on the different aspects of the topic that we are talking about. I'm going to turn immediately to all our discussants and offer each of them 2 minutes to add their own perspective as a reaction to what we have already heard from our panelists. And then we will come back to our panelists for an additional brief reflection on the issues. So first, if I may turn to Mr. Vasuki Shastri, Associate Fellow in the Asia Pacific Program of Chatham House. Vasuki, please. Can you hear us, Vasuki?
Yes, I can hear you. Sorry.
Yes, please, go ahead.
I just wanted to make 2 points reflecting on what has been raised by the panelists before. One is on voice and representation. I think when we think about social justice, we also should look at global governance models, which are a lagging indicator of where the world is today. And obviously, country representation and voice in multilateral institutions is a key building block. But at the same time, we have to figure out as we reconfigure global governance as to how we include the voice of impacted communities, those in the front line of climate distress, for example, because that mechanism is not working very, very well. Certainly, we've got these endless COP summits year upon year, and we see that the same set of issues are being discussed without the impacted communities having a seat on the table. And this, I think, is profoundly important from one perspective, that is debt. And I think, every year, or you have any number of panelists and experts who say, in order to address climate change, we need trillions and trillions of dollars. And much of that goes in the form of debt. So how do we make sure that the money that goes into building climate resilience, for example, comes through grants and hyper-concessional loans rather than adding to the already overburdened debt situation in many low-income countries? So, bringing all of this together to better conversation on voice and representation and global governance, I think will advance social justice. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vasuki. I'm turning to Kiev, to Dr. Maxim Yakovlev, Head of Department of International Relations and Director of School for Policy Analysis at National University of Kiev, Mohila Academy. Maxim, please.
Thank you, Ambassador Mlinar. I'll be brief in saying that all the comments, all the topics raised are extremely important, and I also support the idea that topics are interconnected. And this interconnected is very important. From a Ukrainian perspective, what I would like to add is, of course, that we saw that the world can show and demonstrate solidarity, especially in the very difficult times of war and invasion of Ukraine. But the problem it raises is, and there's many things that we now discuss, is about how we can be proactive in our actions so that we do not need a war or any other extreme crisis or extreme tragedy to make us all work together. Like Emma, like the examples that she provided of many proactive actions, proactive initiatives that actually can help us against the climate change and improve the conditions of humanity. There were interesting things that His Excellency Danilo Turk said about improving the international cooperation also in fighting corruption. And the general idea is that we work together, I repeat this word again, proactively, to prevent bad things from happening, actually, and making us work together, invest into local indigenous communities, invest into fighting corruption at national level, showing and demonstrating solidarity as we can improve our condition. Thus, I think that the changes that we need to make in our perception, our worldview, is that we not only fight the aftermath of bad things that happen, but by providing solidarity, working together, collaborating, providing more investments actually into good things, we can prevent bad things from happening. And by doing so, we can actually improve the general human condition. Thank you.
Thank you, Maxim. And of course, hearing about proactivity and solidarity from Kiev, from Ukraine, is extremely relevant in today's global realities that we are facing. I would like now to turn to Dr. Sahara Karimi, filmmaker and university lecturer, former Director General of Afghan Film Organization. Sahara.
Thank you very much. I'm very direct person, so maybe some of my sentences and words wouldn't make happy some people, but I'm sorry. When we talk about social justice or these words of like solidarity, equality, I don't know, citizen-centric system, good governing and everything, it doesn't exist anymore in Afghanistan right now because of the Taliban. And unfortunately, I can say that the international community, the international and global political leaders, they somehow know it, but they don't take any action. And we had all these things before 15th of August of 2021, especially when US decided to leave Afghanistan in 2014, and they decided to negotiate with the Taliban, and they had this shameful peace deal with the Taliban. But the youth and the young people of Afghanistan, the young generation of Afghanistan, they decided, okay, we are going to continue to rebuild our country. We are going to continue to develop our country, and especially women. But today, right now that I speak with you, there is no inclusivity inside that so-called de facto government of Taliban, and there is no woman. Millions of girls are not going to school. Hundreds of women cannot go back to their workplaces. Children cannot have access to any health system. So when you talk about social justice, there is a violation of social justice in a country like Afghanistan. But unfortunately, the world somehow just look. I'm so jealous of Ukraine, to be honest. I'm so jealous of Ukraine. And we, like young people of Afghanistan, women of Afghanistan, we are so jealous of Ukraine because of the huge solidarity that the world has for Ukraine. But when this solidarity comes to Afghanistan, it becomes kind of a very wrong narrative about Afghanistan.
Yeah, this is a strong and important reminder. And of course, solidarity is a powerful tool that has to be used equally in all important contexts where it becomes relevant. I wish we had more time. I have to move to our final discussant, Gaba Lekel Maria, Communications and Advocacy Officer of Africa Freedom of Information Center. Please.
Thank you so much. I would like to supplement on what Johanna said on access to information and highlight that recently Africa Freedom of Information Center released a research study on inclusion of women-led businesses in public procurement. And it was sad that we actually found that only 1% of women were able to participate in public procurement and gain from it, simply because most of these women had no access to information on what public procurement was or the existence of these bids and contracts. It was very sad that it was actually not just Uganda, but almost all of the East Africa, which I think is the case for the whole of Africa. And the most vulnerable are the rural people, because even when some know about their right to access information, they do not know where to get this information, and no one is telling them about it. So I think if we are to talk about an equitable world, then we must prioritize, governments must prioritize enacting laws that provide for access to information. And even after adopting these laws, governments need to ensure that every citizen can freely express this right, exercise this right in every way. I think that's the way we can achieve social justice and an equitable world. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that contribution. I would like now to turn back to our panelists for very brief, really 1 minute reactions to the discussion that we are having, really on a number of important aspects of the topic. But also there is one particular a question coming from our online audience, and it is actually focused on what's termed corruption in the global south is often referred to as lobbying in the global north. And the question is, how might these differing perspectives impact international governance and efforts to combat corruption? Just to add it into the conversation that we are having, I will first turn to President Turk, followed by Mr. Hassan Damluji. President Turk, over to you.
Thank you very much. Two very quick comments. First, on the notion of debt situation and debt burden, which was raised by discussants, I would like to say one of the priorities of any future initiative should be creating more of fiscal space for social development. On corruption, as I was trying to explain in my initial remarks, but I couldn't finish my statement, was simply in our proactive attitude to corruption, we, that is the initiators, would like to have the focus on what we call grand corruption. And that grand corruption can be defined in terms of several articles of the existing anti-corruption convention. And of course, that discussion is very necessary and would cover such things as laundering of money, and money that is meant for, some people would euphemistically call lobbying purposes, but is in fact bribery of international or national officials. So, in short, we need proactive action, we need to focus on grand corruption, and we need to look into these techniques much more carefully than was the case so far.
Thank you. Thank you for this very important, I would say, framework perspective, which is much valuable. Hassan, please, over to you.
Yeah, great. Thank you. These were very great challenges and comments from the discussants. I want to just try a couple of them together. Starting with my friend from Afghanistan. What you described is precisely not a situation of global solidarity, right? What you described with regards to Ukraine is actually more almost racial solidarity, where the solidarity for Ukraine has mostly come from European countries and countries whose populations are greatly of European origin. And that is exactly the opposite of while many countries in the world have seen Ukraine in the same way that you are upset that people have seen Afghanistan, which is to say they've stood by. And so what would it take to create a world where where we all see each other as human beings at the same level? And this, really comes to that point about corruption versus lobbying, right? We don't apply the same standards, neither to Afghanistan and Ukraine, nor to corruption versus lobbying. We use a different lens. We have more empathy for some countries' activities or political system than others. And this really brings me to the point about debts. And because we don't have enough solidarity, we have imagined that the vastly increased money that we know we need to spend on things like climate change we can't possibly increase, grants. So let's just lend them the money. Can the private sector do it? The answer is no. What we are calling for is something called global public investment. This is about changing the mentality of foreign aid, a small amount of charity for poorer countries, and talking about global public investment as a world to solve these transnational problems. Until we have that, based on solidarity, we're not going to solve climate change or get near it.
Thank you, Hassan. Very, very useful and very really pertinent to the discussion that we are having. Dr. Usta, if I can turn also back to you for just really a 1 minute quick reaction.
Yes, I would like to re-emphasize the need for global solidarity because it resonates the pursuit of unity in purpose and intention. And I just want to share one element of solidarity that we have seen in Rwanda. When the Taliban took over the Afghanistan again, one of the high schools that had girls were relocated to Rwanda, and we host a Rwandan, an Afghanistan high school, and it can be as simple as those small things. So I think when we look at global, because we have the civil society here also, when we are looking at global partnership and global solidarity, we should also bring it to that level of doing the smallest thing, of creating a safe place for others. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Dr. Usta. If I may now turn to Emma, and she will be followed by Johanna. Emma, please.
Yeah, thank you. Firstly, I'm absolutely delighted to hear from Hassan that solidarity is higher than it's perceived. And I would agree with him also that political and what I would consider to be institutional solidarity is falling woefully short. And, I think lobbying, to answer the question, very much comes in here, and same with corruption, because they distort that solidarity. And that prevents urgent climate action from happening, and it keeps people in poverty. I think to answer Johanna's point, which I thought, again, was very compelling, I think RED really demonstrates the incredible power that creating really strong links between the community and individuals can bring, particularly where it can empower women. And then on Vasuki's point, and he makes such an incredibly important point around stretched budgets and emerging markets and debt burden. And I think that's why now more than ever, it's absolutely critical that we mobilize private capital into this. And I would second Dr. Vaxon's call to invest in communities. We cannot solve the climate crisis or build a pathway out of poverty without communities, capital, solidarity, and free choice. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Those partnerships are crucial. Johanna, back to you.
Yeah, I'm going to close out very briefly. So really just wanted to react to, Maxim's point about the need to be proactive to prevent bad things from happening. And also was sort of Vasuki's very compelling sort of reminder about the sort of the importance of, having a better conversation about voice and representation. I want to close out with just, I am optimistic about that that these things can happen when we start from sort of a place of human empowerment, right? If we start from the place of empowering people, which is what much of this conversation has been about, is that need. I'm optimistic that we're going to be able to achieve those things with even, with all of the challenges that have been described today. I think that the desire for that empowerment to happen is a very positive step. So thank you for that.
Thanks very much, Johanna, for that perspective. You have made my job as moderator really easy because through collective spirit, we have indeed addressed such a vast array of important, crucial issues of social justice and governance. And I do believe, also based on our today's discussion, these issues do remain at the center of the realities that we are facing in today's world. And if we want to be more successful in leaving no one behind and in addressing some of the crucial inequalities in particular, wherever they are, if they are in developing countries or in richer parts of the world, no one is really immune to the challenges that we are facing. And we need to be more united than ever. And indeed, as has been clearly mentioned, we have to express solidarity in practical terms in a truly inclusive and selfless manner possible. I would like to thank all our distinguished panelists and discussants for bringing wonderful topics and wonderful issues to this discussion. I'm sure that our audience online benefited tremendously from the various aspects that we were able to concentrate on. I only wish we had a bit more time because we really touched on so many different issues, and many of them, at least 10 of them, would deserve to go deeper and to continue the discussion. But I'm sure this is not the end of it, and I hope we inspired you for further interactions. And of course, we invite you to stay engaged because, dear friends and colleagues, only together through important engagement like that we can change things for the better. So let's leave it on this hopefully positive note. But again, thanks very much to all of you, and until we have another opportunity to continue this discussion. Thank you, and bye-bye.